All right, we welcome you on in to a Tuesday Locked On Syracuse. Lots to discuss on the show today. Some football news to get to because Syracuse is after a couple of Virginia guys for the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach openings. Exciting stuff there. We'll discuss that. And Buddy Boeheim goes on Gomez and Friends and kind of breaks down the COVID timeline and what it all means for Syracuse heading forward for Syracuse basketball. So we'll discuss all that on today's podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single weekday, the only place for daily SU pods. Tim Leonard, Tyler Aki here with you today. And today's episode is brought to you by Sonos. Sonos is the official sponsor of ESPN College Football. Go to Sonos.com to learn more. Also, follow the show on Twitter if you haven't already at LO_Syracuse. Going to be doing a Twitter mailbag is the plan tomorrow, unless some more news happens. Yeah. But that's our
and YouTube
plan.
Mailbag. You can comment in the YouTube as well. We'll get you some of your questions. And I saw a couple already filter in, actually.
Right. We've gotten some good YouTube comments. Subscribe to the show on YouTube if you haven't already. We're totally free and available wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. So we'll start out with the basketball side of things because that's, I guess, pretty timely and pretty pressing news as well. But I think the deeper conversation we'll have is on football because that's some really exciting stuff on a potential offensive coordinator replacement and quarterback coach that we'll discuss in a little bit there. But Buddy Boeheim goes on TK99, does his typical Monday slot with Gomez and Friends. And he kind of lays out what happened here timeline-wise. And I guess the most important thing that he said is that Syracuse does have at least 4 starters that have tested positive for COVID-19. Cole Swider and Jimmy Boeheim got it at the start of sort of last week after the Georgetown game. They actually were out, and the team practiced without Cole and Jimmy for a good portion of last week. And then on Thursday, we found out, or I should say Buddy and Joe found out that they tested positive. So that led to the news coming out Friday morning that those 2 games are being canceled. Wasn't totally clear if it's just those 4 players, but we know that it's definitely those 4 players, and that's 4 of your top 4 scorers and probably your 4 best shooters. So it's a key group that has been tested positive here. The good news is Buddy said that his symptoms are very mild, and he made it seem like the team is planning on getting back to practice this upcoming Thursday on the 23rd, which leaves a good amount of time to practice for that Georgia Tech game. So that was the good news I took from this.
That's about a week there. And I think what I'm most intrigued by is how much this team learned from last year's COVID pause, right? Because we saw how sluggish they came out. And it's not just them. This was an across the nation thing, how sluggish a lot of teams came out of their pause. And you just hope that it's not that same way. So you maybe do some things differently than last year. Like, we saw how winded some of these players were. We even got the quotes that some players hadn't even done anything over that pause. And that's the thing that's worrisome to me. I hope that this looks like a different team. I'm not saying they're going to pick up right where they left off in terms of a physical fitness standpoint, because obviously there's going to be some difference once you get back into game action, but you just hope it's minimalized this time around. This is your second bite at this apple, all right? You should be able to have a better plan in place based on what you did from a season ago.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that Buddy and Joe tested positive basically in the same exact time period last year. This is their second time getting it, and it was right around Christmas, and Buddy talked about how he had to spend Christmas last year in the guest room when he was on the TK99 show. This year, it seems like you should get back on the 23rd. Now, I guess this is all fluid. Who knows if more positives will come out? Who knows right now? Given
that's what happened last year. What wasn't Florida? There was supposed to be a Florida State game right around the New Year period, and then that got axed off the schedule.
I think it was. Yep. And that was right after beating Buffalo in overtime. And then Buffalo, I think, had a couple players that subsequently got Syracuse players testing positive, and it became a thing. And Buddy, it took some time for him to get back in the swing of things. Joe Girard, who it's worth noting does have asthma, we know, and it did definitely throw him off a little bit last year and was a factor in probably his down season, I think you could call it, last year in terms of his overall performance on the court. I'm optimistic that hopefully now that they are vaccinated, I'm assuming they are, and we have no indication, I guess, one way or the other, but I think it's pretty clear they are vaccinated, that hopefully this won't be as much of a factor this year in terms of their performance. And like you said, they've been through it now, and it's not like they're just jumping back into another game. It seems like they're going to have 5 or 6 practices before this Georgia Tech game.
And not just that, Villanova, remember, also had a pause last season as well. So Cole Swider has sort of been through this. Marquette, I just looked, did not have one. And then obviously Benny Williams, I don't have the high school specs on what his season was like. But yeah, so it's interesting to note that not just that, but it's a veteran group, right? This is a team that has a lot of elder statesmen on it, and that should factor into, okay, making sure we're doing the right things over this break. There's obviously some sort of group chat. Hopefully there's something going on so that each of these players can be at their best for when they do finally come back. So you don't have that lull period where you lose 3 or 4. Because if this team loses 3 or 4 to open up ACC play,
yeah,
the whole thing's over, right? Like, kiss goodbye the NCAA tournament, kiss goodbye going over 500 for the season. It's not going to be good if that's the way that this team comes out of this COVID pause.
Yeah, I guess my concern is I just hope that Jim Boeheim doesn't get it too, because if Jimmy and Buddy have it, now you feel like the timeline already to this point, we would know if Jim Boeheim had it because Buddy got it after Jimmy got it. And I don't know. It's just that would be the concern.
It is worth noting, I believe, Jimmy, Joe, and Buddy all lived together, and Cole maybe in that little
I don't know,
foursome
honestly.
as well. But I know that at least the 3 of them lived together.
Right. So, I mean, we know Jim Boeheim was at his coach's show on Thursday at Carrabba's Live, and then we find out on Friday morning the news that the games have been canceled, basically, or postponed, however you want to phrase that. They're not happening, the Lehigh-Cornell game. But he did bring up how there was some talk that maybe they could sneak in a game on the 26th or the 27th, and they were sort of floating that out and seeing what teams were interested. And he basically said on TK99 that it seems like a long shot, but it's a possibility. It'd be interesting because there's basically no team scheduled to play a game on either of those 2 days. I think there's 2 games in all of Division I on December 26th and December 27th, which makes sense. It's off a Christmas break, and a lot of players go home, rightfully so, and get time with their family. So I don't know how fortunate or how that's going to work out if they are going to be able to pull that off. But I guess it's encouraging. Again, like yesterday we talked, maybe that Georgia Tech game is going to be a little tougher because they're coming right off of a pause. This feels like they're going to have ample time to get ready for Georgia Tech and really should be rested and ready to go, assuming they get back up healthy, the guys that did test positive.
Right. I'm thinking too with scheduling a game, it's going to be tough, but you may find a team that is in the same boat, maybe a team that's in a pause right now alongside Syracuse that says, you know what, we want to get a game in, okay? And we've got some time. Each team's going to sort of be at an equal disadvantage as well with limited practice leading into it. And I doubt they're going to take away the holiday break as well. So I would say, yeah, it's probably a long shot, but don't be surprised if you find 2 teams that are extra motivated to get some sort of game in a non-conference capacity on that 26th or 27th.
I would probably welcome it at this point, because if it's the right type of opponent that you can sort of ease back into it a little bit and get ready for ACC play. And I guess the one good thing that has come from this, and there's really not a lot of good that has come from 4 players testing positive, but Buddy did talk about how when Cole and Jimmy went out of practice, a lot of other guys had to step up and play more in practice. And just connecting the dots, you would think that would mean Benny Williams, right? Because 2 forwards go out. Benny's one of the forwards. And at the very least, maybe Benny got some good practice time the week before, and maybe that added game. I know we keep focusing on him in particular. There's other guys, Symir, Frank, that hopefully just the bench in general can get up to speed, and really the entire team get up to speed. But at least maybe that's a positive, that maybe Benny Williams sort of got a chance to play more in practice and show Jim Boeheim what he can do in that setting.
Yeah, and you hope that maybe he gets one extra game in before. So I've got a list in front of me, a list of all the teams that are currently on pause or canceling games due to COVID. This courtesy of Jeff Goodman right here. And let me list off a couple that might make sense from a proximity standpoint that you could pull this off and make sense from the standpoint of, okay, you're probably not going to schedule the toughest of opponents on the 26th and 27th, right? Whereas down the line, like let's say it's in February, maybe you shoot for a bigger fish down the road that way. That makes a little bit more sense. But here's a couple that could intrigue you. Coppin State, Cleveland State, Akron. You could maybe re-up that Cornell game because they're a program on pause right now as
Yeah,
well. But I think that seemed like more of an institutional thing as opposed to they actually had
right.
positive cases. I'd have to double back and see if that was still the case. Loyola, Maryland, Northeastern, Rhode Island. Who else we have here? And that's about it. So, like, you'd welcome, I think, any of those opponents. And like, okay, maybe do you want to bring in a Rutgers or a Seton Hall or a team like that? Up to you. Penn
Get
State,
Kadari back in the
like
dome. I don't
get
know if that would
Kadari. Well,
be
I said
the
Rhode
team
Island.
to
Like,
pick.
how about a Jalen Carey
Right.
revenge game as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. It makes sense for Syracuse. It's just they might be getting back up to speed quicker than some of those teams you
Oh,
mentioned
I
in
left one
pause
off.
there.
Binghamton also in there as
Oh,
well.
that would be
That may
good.
that
I
may
mean,
make the
that's
most
easy.
sense.
Yeah.
I was
So,
going down alphabetically, and I think I read it as Birmingham, so that's why
right.
skipped over it.
I would think that if there is going to be a game on the 26th or the 27th, we would know by what, Thursday? I mean, it feels like you would get that out and then try to sell some tickets and have people understand that, oh, maybe if you're in town over Christmas time
Yeah.
period in Syracuse, you can go to the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. But we did see some of these games come about rather quickly last season, but I think you're right. I think that the fact that there is that holiday there, where pretty much there's going to be very little administrative work during that time, you'd imagine. I get it's athletics and things can happen at the drop of a hat, um, but because of that, I would probably lean with you. Yeah, you probably get this thing out and ready and in motion a lot sooner rather than later.
Well, we will keep you guys updated on the basketball front. Let's dive into the football breaking news that kind of came out late Sunday night, or I guess it may have been even Monday, and talk about that on the football side of things. But first, this is it, the putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours, but on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/locked. And also, we thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen with us every single weekday. And want to remind you guys that make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021. That is coming up. Local experts, betting advice, draft analysis, the most comprehensive college football playoff preview begins this Friday on the Locked On Podcast Network. So, exciting football news. I mean, this is two candidates that really get me excited. As we're talking right now on Monday afternoon, the two candidates, Robert Anae and Jason Beck from Virginia, the report from Pete Thamel is that Syracuse is targeting those candidates. So I don't necessarily know how excited I should
Yeah.
get based on that, but these are not the type of candidates I thought Syracuse was going to be going after for the offensive coordinator position. And Robert Anae was the former OC at Virginia. He would take over the OC role, you would imagine. Jason Beck was the quarterback coach who has worked with Anae for the past 8 seasons at both BYU and Virginia under the Bronco Mendenhall tree. Bronco Mendenhall leaves Virginia, kind of a sudden retirement this offseason. They hire a new coach. Seems like their new coach, Elliott, is going to just hire new coaches under him that are probably more in his camp. So all of a sudden, these are two really intriguing prospects that I guess Syracuse is after, and it seems like based on Pete Thamel's tweet, there's a realistic shot that they could be heading to Syracuse soon, which would be awesome.
And Pete Thamel pretty good with the Syracuse stuff. I would say one of the few national guys that actually gives a damn about Syracuse, mostly because he's an alum of the university. I would imagine that plays a big factor in it all, but he's one of the few guys that actually gives acknowledgement to the program. They're definitely intriguing hires. And here's my one little hesitation with it. Listen, Virginia was fantastic offensively last year, but the 5 years prior are a little uninspiring when you look at it. When I take a look at it, so outside the top 45 in total offense, 5 of the 6 years, a couple of those years were spent outside the top 100 and pretty consistently outside the top 40 in scoring offense as well. 5 of those 6 years also outside the top 40. But they were winning football games, right? They were bowl eligible 4 of the 6 years. You give them a pass for year one, and then the COVID year, like who knows? Maybe they could have gotten in if they had another game. They went 5-5, so if they had 2 more games to play with, maybe they get into another bowl game there. But what I don't understand is, and maybe I shouldn't say don't understand, the fit is weird. I think a little bit because this is a very pass happy offense and operation that they run. 3 times that they've finished inside the top 10 in passing play percentage and 5 times in the top 30. Syracuse doesn't have a passing quarterback. And that to
right,
me
but I think these two guys have had some history of developing previously more like not great passing quarterbacks into good passing quarterbacks. When you talk about Taysom Hill, who we now all know is on the Saints and was at BYU with them, they really did a nice job developing him. Bryce Perkins, who was at Virginia and was their quarterback, I believe, until this past year, or maybe recently, whatever it was. He was a guy that was not a great throwing mechanics, not a great passer, and they developed into him into a great dual threat option at the quarterback position.
But here's the thing is, they may only have 1 year to do it, right? And I don't know how much you can accomplish in 1 year. Like all that stuff is a process usually. And if Dino Babers gets fired, if this isn't an instant hit success, then guess who else is going out the door? All those guys too. And that's why I'm a little hesitant to be all in, but you're right. This is probably the best that you can do. This is the best you can hope for.
Oh, it's great.
It's certainly shooting above your weight here in terms of the names that you'd be bringing in and really the expectations that you'd be bringing in. I think both you and I probably thought this was going to be some group of 5 candidate who is maybe the young hot shot that wants to get his chance at the Power 5. But to make I'm not going to say lateral move because I don't necessarily think it's a lateral move per se, because Virginia certainly a better program than Syracuse is. But listen, it's not a perfect match, but you're probably not going to find a perfect match for a guy who may only be here for 1 year.
So I think there's reason to believe, now I don't know, obviously, but maybe them coming means Dino Babers gets at least 2 years, right? Like maybe they have a conversation with John Wildhack and say, all right, John, like, look, we're pretty good. We're highly sought after. And the only reason you're going to get us is if 1, you give us some decent money, and 2, you assure us that Dino Babers is not fired after this next year. And then if you're John Wildhack, you're in kind of a tough position, but I think you would welcome them in and say, all right, that's fine because you're way better than we could get, and you're way better than a group of 5 type of hire at the offensive coordinator position.
Well, maybe not asking Dino to be around for 2 years, but they'll ask for a 2-year contract so that they have to be bought out. They're going to get their money, and then they can take the next step at whatever venture because it'd be very tough to judge these coaches for a 1-year sample, right? What, good or bad. Obviously, if they perform really well, then guess what? Dino Babers is probably back no matter what for another season. But I wouldn't necessarily say that these guys are going to be vouching for Dino to be around. They're probably vouching for themselves. Get your own security and ask for a 2-3-year contract, something along those lines.
Right, but they definitely want stability with the head coach. It would probably be,
but they
realize that's why
the situation they're going into as well. And if you're the athletic department, I think you would be making a mistake caving to the demands of an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach. Like this team is already in financial hell.
I mean, if you can get these two guys, again, maybe it comes down to how much you would be excited about the hire in the first place. But to me, this is a home run hire, like with a capital H, if you get these two guys, because I mean, this is the third best offense in the country last year at Virginia.
Yeah, but that's a one. Again, I kind of laid out the numbers. They haven't been great most of the time either.
I think that's a little unfair because they haven't necessarily had like eye-popping talent. And when you talk about they weren't inside the top 40 in offense, I'm assuming you mean in the nation. Like that's fine. Like he can still be a good offense of the years, and not be inside.
I'll say this:
top 40.
If I did 4 of 6 instead of 5 of 6, we're talking top 80.
Yeah,
so that's the problem there. And listen,
the numbers that I've seen in the past couple years from their offenses are very solid for Virginia football. And I, just watching them this past year, I get that they didn't really use the running back a lot, and that's sort of an interesting thing here is talking to people I know.
Run percentage in the ACC. Right. So last in the ACC in running the football in terms of number of plays.
So I reached out to a couple people I know from Virginia. I think this is interesting because it's always good to get that type of perspective. And they would be totally fine, it seems like, with Anae leaving. I mean, he's already left the program. They're kind of like mixed reviews on Anae because a lot of people viewed him as not using the running backs enough. They ran it, and when they ran it, it was like pretty much all the quarterback just tucking it under on an RPO last year. So a lot of the people I know were like, yeah, Sean Tucker better transfer. They're just going to not get him the football. Now, hopefully he would adapt more to Sean Tucker in that instance. But the interesting thing is they like 100% approval rating on Jason Beck, it seems like, from scouring the Virginia boards, talking to people at Virginia I know, seeing the Twitter responses. Everyone's like, Anae can leave, but Beck, we need to promote him. And a lot of people want him to become the OC at Virginia. He is going to call the plays, it seems like, for their Fenway Bowl game coming up. And there's been a big push that Elliott should elevate Beck to the OC position because they think he's very responsible for enhancing these quarterbacks. And also, Brennan Armstrong, it's kind of up in the air whether he's coming back or going to the NFL. And there was some rumblings that if Beck is elevated to OC and kept around, then Brennan Armstrong would be more likely to come back.
Well, what about this? All right, what about this little fantasy land scenario? Like,
I know where you're going.
You may not be able to get Anae. Like, who knows how that is? But why not, if Beck is this next big thing, why not bring him in potentially as your OC? Because who knows? Maybe that brings Armstrong along with. We all know how the relationships of this business work. That's usually one of the paths. You see a coach transfer to a new program, and sometimes you see his players come along with them.
Right. So Armstrong did say in an article about a week ago that for him, it's either Virginia or NFL right now. But I'm with you. I mean, I think it's a possibility if you get Beck. It's probably not super likely after reading that article. But yeah, we'll put a pin on this for a second because I do have a lot more to discuss on this. And I think this is an interesting topic on basically the offensive coordinator position and the future of that position for Syracuse. But bowl season is here. And I've been telling you guys about PrizePicks. If you still haven't signed up, what are you waiting for? In addition to college football action, PrizePicks makes college basketball more exciting. They are the leader in college sports daily fantasy. They offer more college football and basketball props than anyone in the world and offer all kinds of players, star players from the Power 5, as well as mid-major players you might not have even ever heard of. PrizePicks offers any prop you can think of in basketball. You can play points, rebounds, assists, threes made, and more. All of your users that deposit and use promo code Locked On will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Again, that promo code Locked On at prizepicks.com. You can also do some mixed sports entries, which is really fun. You could take the over maybe on Gerard combined with the under on, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers or something like that. You can get creative on PrizePicks. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com. Use promo code Locked On or go to your App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. So I guess the question becomes maybe if you were John Wildtack and they said, and I think you kind of sort of hinted at what your answer would be to this, but Robert and I and Jason Beck came to you and said, we love it. We love Dino. here's the thing. We're worried about Dino's job security. Would you guarantee 2 years to these guys and say, come on in because you're way better than we could get maybe outside of you guys?
You definitely have to consider it. I just wouldn't let it get in the way of potentially buying out Dino Babers. Because at the end of the day, you saw how promising money down the road has probably screwed this program for a while here, right? Like this whole Dino Babers not letting him go because of the buyout money. John Wildhack can say whatever he wants. This is 100% buyout related for why Dino Babers is still the head coach of this football team. So promising that money down the road has really hurt this team. And I cannot see John Wildhack doing that just from a financial standpoint. Now, maybe things amp up revenue wise over the next couple of seasons. But right now, it'd be really tough for me to guarantee long-term stuff to anybody.
I get that. I think this is a really important position that the football
I'm
program
100% with you on that. Right?
Right.
Like this is an important hire.
This is everything, because if you're Dino and you don't get this hire right, you're out, at least soon. I don't know if it's next year or the year after, depending on maybe how these talks go, but this is it. I mean, this is where Syracuse makes their turning point. And if Dino has any future with Syracuse, it comes down to this decision. And you have Tony White, who you've excelled on the defensive side of the ball. You're bringing back Mike Schmidt. You're bringing back the swag daddy. It seems like Nick Monroe. That's probably not officially official, but he's been doing some recruiting and stuff. So I would be very encouraged about the direction of the coaching staff and the moves that they made, adding a special teams guy. I'd just be very encouraged to see what they have next season if you bring in these two guys, Jason Beck, Robert Anae, to help engineer the passing offense. Because if you can get any semblance of a passing offense and you have Sean Tucker, maybe you have something. Maybe you have a bowl team next year.
Yeah, no, listen, if the passing comes together, there's no doubt in my mind that this could be a bowl team. It's just, what kind of weapons do you have? Because we can knock on the quarterback all we want, but outside of Sean Tucker, there aren't weapons on this team right now at the receiver position. You saw some promising things sprinkled throughout, like a Damian Alford, but you're losing tight ends. You still don't have a great depth of receiving options as well. You kind of find yourself in a little bit of a talent gap. One reason why I would be looking for a guy like Anae or Beck coming from Virginia is to further that footprint, though, in the DMV area from a recruiting standpoint. But again, that only helps if this is a long-term project. I would feel much more comfortable with bringing in Anae and Beck or just one of those names if this was a guaranteed long-term project, which basically would mean you'd be starting with a new head coach right now.
Right. I'd be really excited if it happens, and we'll see if it becomes official in the coming days. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk more about it, hopefully. One interesting thing to me is I wonder who leaked this information to Pete Thamel. Was it Anae's agent? Was it John Wildhack? Or, I just don't know who that would have been. And I think it's interesting now, where does this go from here? How quickly do we figure out that this is serious or not? Because targeting is, again, just different language than they're coming to Syracuse. I mean, I caution the fan base that is already sort of expecting that they're coming, but I say that knowing that we could get done with this podcast and I would not be shocked to see those two names officially coming to Syracuse. I also think off of, was it Zach Arnett, I believe was his name, who went to Mississippi State? Off of that news, if you're John Wildhack, you want to make sure that you vet them thoroughly and you're confident when you put out that press release that they are in fact coming.
Right. And again, that was sort of an odd situation. I wouldn't expect something like that to happen, but I'm with you. The language of targeting, like we see how these deals happen, right? Usually when something like that comes out, it is pretty damn close to being done. And yeah, like you said, I mean, we even joked about it, like 5 minutes after we get off of here, we know the news is probably going to become official because that's just how A, the universe treats us, and B, like that's just also how these things sort of work as well. They can be very quick from the initial report tweet to when everything is sort of finalized.
Exactly. Yeah, so if we get that news, then we'll be talking about that tomorrow. If not, we'll be diving into your mailbag questions. Tweet at us your mailbag questions at @LO_Syracuse. The final point really I have on this situation is that I do think the familiarity in the ACC is a plus as well, and that could maybe ease the transition a little bit. These guys, and it's funny because Syracuse is set to play Virginia next year. That's one of their coastal opponents on the schedule right now, but they already know the ACC defenses, and I don't view this as come in and it's going to take some time to incorporate your offensive system. I think they've got a pretty dialed in offensive system already, which is good because Syracuse does not have time to waste on incorporating an offensive system right now. But what did we ask for? At least what I asked for was someone outside the family, quote unquote, someone that Dino doesn't know. And this is that. That's exciting to me.
Yeah. So I was looking at the sort of path for Robert Anae and the different stops he's been at. He's pretty much coached at every single school that Dino Babers has also coached at.
And
but it's the timeline
born in Hawaii.
The timeline's just off by like 5 years on everything.
Right.
And so that I found that interesting. So you know that there's ties somewhere. Like he's spoken with people that know Anae really well, and I'm sure he's got a solid relationship at least with them too. But yeah, they haven't been on staffs together, and I'm a little surprised. I thought Dino would probably try to go with someone that he trusted deeply for the offensive coordinator spot, knowing very well that this could be his last season. And he is trying to save his job this year. But the fact that he's kind of branching out here, I think it is a good thing. But you're right. I don't think it's going to be some sort of stark curve in terms of getting everyone ready. I just think that you look at, I even wonder, like, who is going to be the quarterback? Like, what if Anae and Beck come in and say, you know what, we kind of like this guy who's a little bit more ready to throw the football, and Justin Lamson. I'm not saying Lamson's ready to throw the football, but I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there. Like, I'm wondering what kind of shakeup we might see, too, at quarterback, because that's ultimately where this whole thing starts.
Right. Yeah, it's intriguing, too, because you would think if you're a recruit, we have not recruited the quarterback position well. That has been well documented. Jason Beck at least has a pretty strong pedigree. I know Sterling Gilbert had Jimmy Garoppolo and so did Dino Babers, but this is a pretty good pedigree of taking a decent quarterback and giving them really solid numbers in their system. So it's exciting stuff. We'll see where it goes from here, and we'll continue to keep you guys updated on that front. But our plan right now for tomorrow is to get to a little bit of a Twitter and YouTube mailbag, or if you have an Apple podcast review, you can do it that way and send us a question through that. We'll scour.
You can rate on Spotify now too. I don't know if
you can really.
You can rate on Spotify.
I've been waiting for them to do
addition.
That.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So rate us on Spotify. Give us 5 stars there if you haven't already. We appreciate you guys for making us your first listen every single weekday. We're here with you through the holiday season. If you got a long drive coming up, anything like that, we are your go-to spot for Syracuse news as we continue to keep you updated on football, basketball, recruiting, everything like that. So thank you for listening today, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.